The sanctuary lights blazed down on me like interrogation lamps as my daughter gripped my arm hard enough to leave bruises, dragging me toward the altar where Pastor Reynolds waited with an open Bible and a wooden cross. My son flanked my other side, his fingers digging into my shoulder, both of them moving with the mechanical determination of soldiers escorting a prisoner to execution. I tried to plant my feet, but my shoes scraped uselessly across the polished wood floor. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now, let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. 3 weeks earlier, I'd made the mistake of telling my family about the dreams. The vivid, recurring visions that woke me at 3 a.m. with my sheets soaked through, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape my chest. In those dreams, I stood in places I'd never been, spoke languages I'd never learned, and watched events unfold that I couldn't possibly know about. When I researched the details later, every single thing I'd dreamed had actually happened, sometimes decades before I was born. My daughter Keisha had listened with widening eyes across the kitchen table that morning, her coffee growing cold between her hands. My son Trevor had set down his phone for the first time in months, his face draining of color as I described how I'd seen their great-grandmother's death in vivid detail, including the blue dress she wore and the hymn playing on the radio. Facts I'd never known until I called my aunt to verify them. "That's not normal, Mama," Keisha had whispered, sliding her chair back from the table. Trevor had left the room without a word, and I heard him making a phone call in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. Now the church smell overwhelmed me. Old hymnals, furniture polish, and the sickly sweet perfume the church mothers wore. Sweat rolled down my spine beneath my Sunday dress. The congregation filled every pew, necks craning to watch my humiliation. I recognized neighbors, co-workers, people I'd known for 30 years, all of them staring with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Pastor Reynolds stepped forward, his expensive suit jacket catching the light. He'd started at this church only 6 months ago, young and charismatic, nothing like the gentle old pastor who'd baptized my children. "Sister Ebony, your family has brought concerns," he announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. I yanked my arm, but Keisha's grip tightened. Trevor's hand moved to the back of my neck, forcing my head down. "They've seen the signs, the speaking in unknown tongues, the knowledge of things you shouldn't know." My knees hit the steps leading to the altar, the impact sending pain shooting up my thighs. Someone in the congregation gasped. I looked up at Pastor Reynolds, searching his face for mercy, for reason, but found only cold certainty. I tried to push myself up from the steps, but Trevor's hand pressed harder against my neck. The polished wood scraped against my palms as I braced myself, my gold bracelet catching and scratching the surface. My breath came in sharp gasps that echoed through the sanctuary. Pastor Reynolds opened a leather-bound book, the pages crackling in the silence. He began reading in a voice that rose and fell like waves crashing, words I didn't fully understand pouring out in a torrent. Latin, maybe, something ancient that made my skin prickle. I twisted my head to the side, catching sight of my sister Maureen in the third row. She sat with me, hands folded in her lap, lips pressed into a thin line, not meeting my eyes. Next to me, my mother dabbed at her face with a tissue, her shoulders shaking. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. The congregation began to hum, a low collective drone that vibrated through the floorboards and up through my bones. I felt the sound in my teeth, in my skull. Someone behind me started clapping a steady rhythm. Others joined in, the percussion building until the whole church throbbed with it. Pastor Reynolds descended the steps, his polished shoes clicking with each measured stride. He held a small vial in one hand, clear liquid sloshing inside. With the other hand, he gestured for silence. The humming stopped instantly, leaving only the ragged sound of my breathing and the creak of old wood settling. "The demon speaks through her," he declared, circling me slowly. "It reveals hidden truths to convince you it is divine knowledge, but we know the source." I opened my mouth to protest, but Keisha's hand clamped over it, pressing so hard my lips crushed against my teeth. I tasted copper, blood from where my tooth had split the inside of my cheek. I thrashed, managing to knock her hand away for just a moment. "There's nothing wrong with me." The words came out hoarse, desperate. Trevor yanked me back by my hair, my scalp burning as strands pulled loose. The sanctuary tilted and spun. I saw the stained glass windows whirling, Jesus ascending, Moses with the tablets, the dove descending. Colors bled together in my vision. Pastor Reynolds uncapped the vial and flicked liquid across my face. It burned like acid where it touched my skin, running into my eyes. I screamed, really screamed then, my voice bouncing off every surface. The congregation shifted, some standing, pressing forward to see better. My hands flew to my face, trying to wipe away whatever he'd thrown on me. The burning intensified, spreading down my neck. I could smell something acrid, chemical beneath the holy water smell he probably intended. My eyes streamed tears that I couldn't blink away fast enough. Through my blurred vision, I saw him reaching for something else on the altar. A small wooden cross. He gripped it like a weapon, turning back toward me with purpose in every movement. The cross was old, dark wood worn smooth by decades of handling, and he held it inches from my face. "Speak its name," he commanded. "Confess the demon that inhabits you." I shook my head violently, droplets of the burning liquid flying from my hair. My Sunday dress clung to me, soaked through with sweat and whatever poison he'd thrown. The pearl buttons down the front dug into my ribs as Trevor hauled me up straighter, forcing me into a kneeling position that made my legs scream. "There is no demon!" My voice cracked, breaking into something raw and animal. Maureen finally looked at me then, her eyes red-rimmed but hard. She mouthed something I couldn't make out. Behind her, Keisha's husband Gerald stood with his phone raised, recording everything. The little red light blinked steadily, documenting my destruction. Pastor Reynolds pressed the cross against my forehead, and I felt splinters catch in my skin. He pushed until I thought the wood might break through bone. The pressure built and built, a vice crushing my skull. Black spots danced across my vision. Somewhere far away, I heard someone shouting my name. But the voice seemed to come from underwater, distorted and strange. My fingers clawed at the carpet runner beneath me, nails catching and tearing. I needed something to anchor myself, some way to prove this was real and not another nightmare. The synthetic fibers burned against my palms as I gripped them. The cross lifted away suddenly, and I gulped air, my chest heaving. Pastor Reynolds studied me like I was something in a petri dish, clinical despite his theatrical performance. He nodded to someone behind me, and I heard heavy footsteps approaching. The footsteps belonged to someone massive. I felt the floor vibrate with each step, and then thick hands grabbed my shoulders from behind, different hands than Trevor's. These were rougher, calloused fingers that dug into the muscle above my collarbone like iron hooks. The grip forced me upright, vertebrae cracking as my spine straightened against my will. "Hold her steady, Darnell." Pastor Reynolds's voice came from somewhere to my left now. I twisted my head, trying to see this new captor, but the angle was wrong. All I caught was a flash of a white dress shirt stretched tight over a barrel chest. The smell of motor oil and cheap aftershave invaded my nostrils. Darnell. I didn't know any Darnell. How many people had my family recruited for this circus? The sanctuary lights flickered overhead, or maybe that was just my vision failing. My temples throbbed with each heartbeat, a drum that threatened to split my skull open. Sweat ran into my eyes, mixing with whatever oil the pastor had doused me with earlier. The burning intensified, forcing me to squeeze my eyes shut. Something cold pressed against my lips. Metal. I clenched my teeth, understanding immediately what they intended. The edge of a chalice rim bruised my mouth as Pastor Reynolds tried to force it between my lips. "Drink," he commanded. "Let the holy water cleanse you from within." I thrashed my head sideways, feeling skin tear where the cup's rim caught my lower lip. The metallic taste of blood bloomed across my tongue. Darnell's hands shifted, one moving to grip the back of my neck while the other clamped around my jaw. His thumb and fingers pressed into the hinges of my jawbone, finding pressure points that sent lightning bolts of agony through my face. My mouth opened involuntarily, a scream building in my throat. The chalice tipped, and liquid flooded in, not water at all, but something thick and bitter that coated my tongue and teeth. I gagged, the reflex violent enough that my whole body convulsed. Darnell held firm, his grip never wavering even as I bucked against him. The substance slid down my throat, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. My stomach clenched, rejecting it immediately. I felt the heave building from deep in my gut, acid rising to meet the foreign liquid. But Darnell's hand clamped over my mouth and nose, cutting off air, forcing me to swallow or suffocate. I swallowed. The room erupted in amens and hallelujahs. Through the blur of my tears, I saw shapes moving closer, forming a tighter circle around me. Hands reached out, dozens of them, pressing against my head, my shoulders, my back. The weight of all those palms crushed down on me, driving me toward the floor. My knees buckled, but Darnell and Trevor held me suspended, a puppet with invisible strings. Someone's fingernails scratched across my scalp, tangling in my hair. Another hand pressed hard against my sternum, right over my racing heart. The pressure there made breathing nearly impossible. Each inhale a battle against the weight. My ribs ached, bone grinding against bone. Pastor Reynolds began chanting something in what he probably thought was Latin. The words were nonsense, syllables strung together without meaning, but the congregation responded with fervent agreement. Their voices built into a cacophony that filled every corner of the sanctuary. The sound waves crashed over me, into me, vibrating in my chest cavity until I couldn't tell where the noise ended and my own body began. My left arm went numb. The tingling started in my fingertips and spread upward, crawling like insects beneath my skin. I tried to shake it off, but Darnell's grip prevented any real movement. The numbness reached my elbow, then my shoulder, transforming into a dead weight that hung uselessly at my side. "The demon fights back!" Pastor Reynolds shouted, and I realized he was pointing at my arm. "See how it attempts to resist?" A stroke. The thought cut through the chaos with crystal clarity. I was having a stroke. The stress, the dehydration, the trauma, my body was shutting down. I tried to speak, to tell them I needed a hospital, but my tongue felt thick and clumsy in my mouth. The words came out as slurred gibberish that only made them press harder, pray louder. More oil splashed across my face, running into my ears and down my neck. The liquid pooled in the hollow of my throat, sticky and warm. I couldn't wipe it away, couldn't move my hands to clear my vision or protect myself. Completely helpless, I existed only as a vessel for their fear and fanaticism. Through the forest of bodies surrounding me, I caught sight of Maureen again. She stood just beyond the inner circle, her hands clasped in prayer position, but her eyes weren't closed. She was watching me intently, studying my face with an expression I couldn't read. Not quite satisfaction, but not concern either. Something in between, something calculating. I forced my eyes to lock onto Maureen's, willing her to see me, her sister, not some demon-possessed stranger. My right hand still had feeling, still obeyed my commands. I twisted it free from whoever held my wrist and reached out toward her, fingers stretching across the gap between us. The movement sent a fresh wave of dizziness through my skull, but I kept my arm extended, trembling with the effort. She took a step backward. The rejection hit harder than any physical blow they'd delivered. My arm dropped, landing against my chest with a thud I barely felt. The numbness had spread to my collarbone now, creeping across my torso like frost over a window. I could see my chest rising and falling, but couldn't feel the breath moving through me. The disconnect between sight and sensation made reality feel slippery, unreliable. Pastor Reynolds moved closer, his knee pressing into the carpet beside my head. He held a leather-bound Bible in both hands, raising it high above my face. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the book's worn cover. The gold-edged pages caught the overhead light as he brought it down fast, stopping just inches from my nose. In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this woman's body. The Bible came down again, this time making contact with my forehead. The impact wasn't hard enough to really hurt, but the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. He was literally beating the devil out of me. Each subsequent strike grew harder, the book's spine connecting with my skull in a rhythm that matched the chanting around us. I turned my head to the side, trying to protect my face. My cheek pressed against the carpet fibers, rough and industrial against my oil-slicked skin. From this angle, I could see under the sofa where dust bunnies gathered in the corners, and a forgotten tennis ball sat forgotten. Such mundane details in the midst of this nightmare. Part of my brain cataloged these observations with detached precision, while another part screamed for escape. Darnell shifted his weight, and suddenly I could move my legs. Not much, just enough to bend my knees and plant my feet flat. I used what strength remained in my right side to push upward, arching my back off the floor. The movement dislodged someone's grip on my shoulder. For one brief moment, I thought I might actually break free. Then Darnell sat on my legs. His full weight came down on my thighs, pinning them completely. The sudden pressure forced the air from my lungs in a grunt that sounded animal, inhuman. Pastor Reynolds seized on the noise immediately. "The demon speaks! We're getting close to breakthrough!" He signaled to someone behind me, and hands grabbed my head from both sides. Fingers tangled in my hair, holding my skull immobile. I couldn't turn away anymore. Couldn't even close my eyes without someone prying them open. They wanted me to see, to witness my own destruction. A woman I didn't recognize knelt beside my right shoulder. She wore a floral dress and sensible shoes, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She could have been anyone's grandmother. She smiled at me with what might have been genuine compassion before placing both palms on my forehead. Her skin felt cold despite the room's stifling heat. "Spirit of deception, spirit of rebellion, spirit of pride, we cast you out." Each declaration came with increased pressure, her hands pushing down like she was trying to shove something back inside my skull. The vertebrae in my neck compressed, sending shooting pains down my spine. I tried to tell them about the numbness, about my arm, about needing medical help, but my mouth produced only garbled sounds that fed their conviction. My vision started to narrow, darkness creeping in from the periphery. Not unconsciousness exactly, but something worse, a detachment from my own body. I could still hear everything, still feel the hands restraining me, but it all seemed to be happening to someone else. Some other woman, some other life. Through the tunnel of my fading sight, I watched Maureen pull out her phone. She held it up, the camera pointed directly at me. Recording. I was recording this. My humiliation, my torture, my complete breakdown, all captured in high definition for posterity, or evidence, or entertainment. The rage that surged through me brought everything back into sharp focus. My body, my pain, my situation. All of it crashed back with overwhelming intensity. The numbness in my left side persisted, but my right arm still worked. My right hand could still form a fist. I swung blindly, my knuckles connecting with something solid. Someone yelped. The pressure on my head lessened for just a second. I swung again, this time making contact with what felt like someone's jaw. The grip on my hair released entirely. "She's attacking us! The demon's manifesting!" Pastor Reynolds stumbled backward, one hand pressed to his reddening cheek. The grandmother woman scrambled away, knocking over a table lamp that shattered against the wall. Only Darnell remained in position, his weight still crushing my legs. But his hands had moved to protect his face, anticipating another strike. I didn't swing at him. Instead, I used my working arm to claw at the carpet, dragging myself backward inch by painful inch. My shoulder scraped against the hallway doorframe as I pulled myself through, each movement sending lightning bolts of agony through my numb left side. The carpet burned against my palms, fibers embedding themselves under my fingernails. Behind me, chairs toppled as my family and their spiritual warriors regrouped. "Block the back door!" Pastor Reynolds shouted, his voice cracking with authority and fear. Footsteps thundered in multiple directions. I didn't have time to calculate routes or strategies. My body moved on pure survival instinct, pulling myself upright using the doorframe, my legs trembling beneath me like a newborn calf's. The numbness had spread from my left side to my entire lower back, making each step a gamble against gravity. The kitchen loomed ahead, its fluorescent light harsh and unforgiving. I stumbled forward, my hip colliding with the counter edge hard enough to leave a bruise. The impact sent a cereal bowl crashing to the floor, milk and cornflakes spreading across the linoleum in a grotesque puddle. My bare feet slipped through it, nearly sending me down again. Maureen appeared in the doorway behind me, her phone still raised, still recording. Her eyes weren't filled with concern or love, or even basic human compassion. They held something clinical, detached, like she was documenting an animal at the zoo. My own daughter had become a stranger, or perhaps she always had been, and I'd simply refused to see it. I grabbed the nearest object, a cast-iron skillet still sitting on the stove from breakfast. The weight of it felt solid, real, empowering. When Darnell rushed through the doorway, his arms outstretched to grab me, I swung without hesitation. The pan connected with his forearm with a sickening crack that echoed through the kitchen. He howled, cradling his arm against his chest, his face contorted in shock and pain. "She broke my arm! This woman's lost her mind!" Good. Maybe broken bones would make them think twice about laying hands on me again. The grandmother woman, I still didn't know her actual name, just that she'd arrived with the prayer circle, lunged at me from the side. She was faster than her age suggested, her fingers like talons reaching for my throat. I pivoted, using the counter for support, and brought my elbow up into her ribs. The air whooshed out of her lungs as she doubled over, gasping. Pastor Reynolds entered more cautiously, his hands raised in what might have been a placating gesture or preparation to defend himself. The red mark on his cheek had darkened to purple. Behind him, I could see two more figures I recognized. Neighbors from down the street, Calvin and his wife Teresa. Of course, my family had recruited the whole damn neighborhood for this spectacle. "Ebony, please," the pastor began, his voice dripping with false gentleness. "This violence only proves—" I threw the skillet at his head. He ducked, and it sailed past him into the hallway, denting the wall with a crash. But the throw had cost me my support. My legs buckled, and I went down on one knee in the milk and cereal mess, my hands splashing in the sticky puddle. Calvin moved in quickly, a broad-shouldered man who worked construction and had the build to prove it. His hands locked around my upper arms, hauling me upright with ease despite my thrashing. I kicked backward, my heel connecting with his shin, but he barely grunted. Teresa joined him, producing a length of rope from somewhere. They'd come prepared for this, planned for my resistance. The rope bit into my wrists as Teresa worked it around them, her fingers swift and practiced. She'd probably learned this in some online tutorial, how to restrain your demon-possessed neighbor. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it weren't happening to me. "Get her back to the living room," Pastor Reynolds commanded, rubbing his jaw where my fist had connected earlier. "We need to bind the demon properly before continuing the ritual." They dragged me backward through the kitchen doorway. My feet slipped in the milk, offering no traction, no way to fight against Calvin's superior strength. The hallway walls blurred past, family photos watching my humiliation with frozen smiles. My wedding picture. My children's graduation portraits. A lifetime of memories bearing witness to this betrayal. Maureen still had that phone raised, following us back into the living room, where overturned furniture and scattered religious paraphernalia painted a picture of chaos. The camera lens reflected the overhead light, a dead electronic eye recording everything for whatever purpose she'd convinced herself justified this. I twisted violently, throwing my weight to the side. Calvin's grip loosened for just a moment, enough for me to wrench one arm partially free. My bound wrists limited my range, but I managed to grab Teresa's hair, yanking hard enough to make her scream. She released the rope, her hands flying up to pry my fingers loose. "Don't let her—" Pastor Reynolds's command cut off as I kicked out blindly, my foot catching him in the stomach. The pastor doubled over with a satisfying grunt, giving me the split second I needed. I wrenched my other arm free from Calvin's loosened grip and dove toward the coffee table, where the scattered holy water bottles lay like abandoned weapons. My fingers closed around one of the glass vessels, just as Teresa lunged at me from behind, her nails raking across my shoulder blades through the thin fabric of my nightgown. I spun, swinging the bottle in a wide arc. It connected with me temple, not hard enough to shatter, but enough to send her stumbling backward into Maureen. Both women crashed into the entertainment center, and I heard the sickening crack of glass as the phone hit the hardwood floor. The camera screen flickered once, then went dark. "No! I need that footage!" Maureen scrambled on her hands and knees, frantically gathering the pieces of her shattered phone. Calvin was on me again before I could press my advantage. His arms wrapped around my torso from behind, pinning my own arms to my sides. The bottle slipped from my grasp, rolling under the couch. I threw my head back hard, aiming for his face, but he'd anticipated the move. He twisted to the side, and I connected only with his shoulder. My lungs burned. Each breath came in ragged gasps that made my ribs ache where the rope had cut into them earlier. Sweat stung my eyes, mixing with tears I refused to acknowledge. This was my living room, my home, and these people, my own family, had turned it into a battlefield. Pastor Reynolds straightened, one hand still pressed against his stomach. His face had gone purple with rage and exertion, veins standing out on his forehead like tributaries on a map. He retrieved the Bible from where it had fallen near the overturned armchair, its pages now crumpled and bent. "Enough of this," he wheezed. "The demon is strong, but the Lord is stronger. Calvin, hold her still." Calvin shifted his weight, bracing his legs wider. His arms tightened around me like steel bands, forcing the air from my lungs. I could feel his heart hammering against my back, smell his cologne mixed with sweat. My brother-in-law, who'd sat at my Thanksgiving table every year for 2 decades, now restraining me like I was livestock. Teresa recovered first, wiping blood from a small cut above her eyebrow. She picked up the length of rope we'd been fighting over earlier and approached slowly, warily, as if I might sprout horns at any moment. Her hands trembled slightly as she began wrapping it around my torso, binding my arms to my sides over Calvin's grip. "Tighter," the pastor instructed. "The demon will exploit any weakness." The rope bit into my flesh, each loop compressing my chest until breathing required conscious effort. I tried to twist away, but Calvin's grip combined with the growing rope cocoon left me no room to maneuver. My shoulders screamed in protest as Teresa pulled the bindings tighter, her face set in grim determination. "Teresa, please," I managed to gasp out. "You know me. You know this is insane." She avoided my eyes, focusing instead on tying off the rope with a series of complex knots. Her fingers worked mechanically, like she was following instructions she'd memorized. When she finished, she stepped back quickly, as if proximity to me might be contagious. Maureen had given up on her phone. She stood now with her arms wrapped around herself, mascara streaking her cheeks in dark rivulets. But her eyes held no sympathy, no second thoughts. Only that same fervent conviction that had brought her here with Pastor Reynolds in the first place. The pastor cleared his throat and opened his Bible to a marked page. The yellow highlighter, visible even from where I stood, told me he'd prepared this passage specifically for tonight. He'd planned this entire assault, probably spent hours selecting the perfect scripture to weaponize against me. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice taking on that resonant quality he used during sermons. "We gather here in the presence of evil." I drove my knee up into Calvin's groin with every ounce of strength I had left. His arms sprang open as he crumpled, a strangled yelp escaping his throat. The rope binding my torso held, but without Calvin supporting my weight, I pitched forward. I hit the floor shoulder first, pain exploding through my collarbone. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs. I lay there gasping, unable to draw breath, the room tilting at dizzying angles. Through my blurred vision, I saw the pastor step over Calvin's writhing form. His shoes entered my field of view, polished black leather with those ridiculously thick rubber soles. His foot pressed down on my shoulder, pinning me face down against the floor. The pressure sent fresh waves of agony through my injured collarbone. Carpet fibers pressed against my cheek, rough and scratchy, still damp with spilled holy water that made my skin itch. "Hold her legs," Pastor Reynolds commanded. Teresa and Maureen each grabbed an ankle, I kicked wildly, but the rope around my torso had thrown off my balance. Teresa took a heel to her wrist but didn't let go. She threw her full weight across my calves instead, and moments later, Maureen did the same. The combined weight of my sisters crushed my legs into the floor. I couldn't move anything below my hips. My shoulder screamed where the pastor's foot ground it into the carpet, and I tasted copper. Must have bitten my tongue when I fell. Pastor Reynolds shifted his weight, pressing harder. My collarbone sent white-hot signals straight through my nervous system. I tried to breathe through the pain, but each inhale felt like broken glass working its way through my chest. "Calvin, get up." The pastor's voice remained eerily calm, as if he was discussing the weather instead of orchestrating my torture. "We need to proceed quickly now." I heard Calvin's labored breathing somewhere behind me. Shuffling sounds. A whimper. The satisfying knowledge that I'd hurt him badly offered cold comfort against the agony radiating from my shoulder. "I can't." Calvin's voice came out strangled, high-pitched. "Now, Calvin, your mother needs you to be strong." The betrayal of those words hit harder than any physical blow. My own son. I'd carried him for 9 months, nursed him through pneumonia when he was 6, worked double shifts to pay for his college, and now he was going to help these people torture me because they'd convinced him I had demons inside. Footsteps approached. Calvin's sneakers, the expensive ones I'd bought him last Christmas, came into view beside the pastor's dress shoes. He crouched down, his face appearing in my limited field of vision. His eyes were red-rimmed, tears tracking down his cheeks, but he reached for me anyway. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. I spat blood at him. The glob caught his chin, and he jerked back like I'd slapped him. "Don't you dare call me that!" I hissed. Calvin wiped his face with his sleeve, then grabbed my bound wrists. He pulled my arms back, wrenching them at an angle that made my injured shoulder shriek in protest. I couldn't stop the cry that tore from my throat, a raw, animal sound I barely recognized as my own. The pastor finally lifted his foot. Without his weight pinning me, Calvin flipped me onto my back. My bound arms trapped beneath me created a new dimension of agony. The rope cut into my wrists, and my shoulder blade ground against the floor. Pastor Reynolds stood over me now, his Bible open in both hands. The basement's fluorescent lights created a halo effect around his head, unintentional blasphemy that would have been funny if I weren't in so much pain. "Hold her head still." Teresa moved from my legs to my upper body. She knelt beside my head and pressed both palms against my temples, fingers digging into my scalp. Her touch was clinical, detached, like she was handling contaminated material rather than her own sister. The pastor began reading again. Latin this time. At least I thought it was Latin. Could have been gibberish for all I knew. The words rolled over me in waves, meaningless sounds that nonetheless made my family lean in with expressions of fearful reverence. I tried to shake my head free of Teresa's grip. Couldn't move it more than a fraction of an inch. My legs were still pinned under Maureen's weight. Calvin had shifted to sit on my bound arms, his full weight pressing them into my lower back. The pastor produced a small vial from his pocket. More holy water, probably. He uncorked it with his teeth, never breaking the rhythm of his chanting. The Latin words continued flowing from his mouth as he tilted the vial toward my face. I clamped my lips shut and squeezed my eyes closed. The water hit my forehead first, cold droplets running down into my hairline, then my cheeks, my nose. He was being methodical about it, making sure to cover every inch of my face. "Open her mouth." I kept my jaw locked tight. Teresa's fingers moved from my temples to my jaw, trying to pry it open. I bit down harder, grinding my teeth together until my jaw muscles ached. Calvin reached over and pinched my nose shut. The need for air built quickly in my lungs. I held out as long as I could. 10 seconds, 15, 20. My chest started burning. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. Finally, my body's survival instinct overrode my will. My mouth opened with a desperate gasp. Pastor Reynolds poured the remaining holy water directly into my mouth. I choked on it, coughing and sputtering. The water went down my windpipe, triggering violent coughing fits that shook my entire body. Each cough jarred my injured shoulder, sending fresh waves of pain through my upper body. "The demon fights!" the pastor announced triumphantly. "But it cannot withstand the power of Christ." I wasn't fighting as a demon. I was choking to death on their blessed water. My lungs spasmed, trying to expel the liquid. I couldn't catch my breath between coughs. My vision started tunneling, darkness creeping in from the periphery. Teresa must have noticed because she suddenly grabbed my shoulders and hauled me onto my side. The coughing continued, but at least now I could breathe between spasms. Water and saliva dribbled from my mouth onto the carpet. My throat felt raw, scraped clean. "She's turning blue," Maureen said, her voice wavering. "The demon is strong in this one." Pastor Reynolds closed his Bible with a decisive snap. "We need to escalate. Calvin, fetch the blessed oil from my bag." I heard Calvin's footsteps cross the room, then the metallic click of a clasp opening. My coughing fit finally subsided, leaving me gasping and trembling on my side. Drool mixed with holy water pooled beneath my cheek. The carpet fibers pressed patterns into my skin. Through watering eyes, I watched Calvin return with a small glass vial. The liquid inside caught the lamplight, amber and viscous. Pastor Reynolds uncorked it, and the smell of frankincense filled the room. Heavy, cloying, making my already raw throat constrict. "Hold her steady," the pastor commanded. 4 sets of hands grabbed me. Teresa and Maureen gripped my legs. Calvin pressed down on my injured shoulder, making me cry out. Someone else, my sister Denise, I realized through the haze of pain, pinned my other arm. They flipped me onto my back again. The sudden movement made my head spin, nausea rising in waves. Pastor Reynolds knelt beside me, the vial tipped and ready. He pressed his thumb into the oil, then drove it hard against my forehead. The pressure felt like he was trying to push through my skull. He dragged his thumb downward, smearing the oil in a cross pattern. Down my forehead, across my eyebrows. The oil ran into my eyes, burning and blurring my vision. "I cast you out, unclean spirit!" His voice rose to a shout. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." He grabbed my jaw, forcing my mouth open again. His fingers dug into the hinges of my jaw until I thought bones might crack. I tried to bite down, but his grip was ironclad. He poured oil directly onto my tongue. The taste exploded across my palate. Bitter frankincense mixed with something else, something medicinal and wrong. I gagged immediately. The oil coated my tongue, my teeth, the roof of my mouth. I couldn't swallow it, couldn't spit it out with his hand clamping my jaw. The taste triggered my gag reflex again and again. My stomach heaved. Pastor Reynolds released my jaw and jumped back just as I vomited. The contents of my stomach, half-digested dinner mixed with holy water and blessed oil, splattered across the carpet. My abdominal muscles clenched painfully with each heave. I couldn't stop. Wave after wave of nausea racked my body. "The demon purges itself!" the pastor cried triumphantly. "We're breaking through its defenses." I wasn't a demon purging. I was a 57-year-old woman whose body was shutting down from trauma and forced ingestion of substances never meant to be consumed in these quantities. Between heaves, I tried to speak, to tell them they were killing me. Only strangled sounds emerged. Maureen's grip on my legs loosened. "Dad, maybe we should—" "Do not waver," Pastor Reynolds cut her off. "The demon will use your doubt against us. It will speak with her voice, make you believe you're hurting your mother. But we are saving her eternal soul." He pulled something else from his bag, a bundle of dried herbs bound with twine. Sage, from the smell of it. He lit one end with a lighter. The herbs caught quickly, flames licking up the bundle before settling into a smoldering glow. Smoke poured off it, thick and gray. Pastor Reynolds waved the smoking bundle over my body, chanting in Latin now. The smoke filled my nose and mouth. I couldn't avoid breathing it in. It invaded my lungs, already raw from choking and coughing. I tried to turn my head away, but Denise grabbed my hair and held me still. The smoke burned. Each breath felt like inhaling fire. My chest tightened, constricting further and further. I wheezed, trying to pull in air, but the smoke was everywhere. It filled the room, hung in clouds above me, pressed down like a physical weight. "More oil," Pastor Reynolds said. Calvin handed him the vial again. This time, the pastor upended it, pouring the remaining oil directly onto my chest. It soaked through my blouse, hot against my skin. He pressed both palms flat against my sternum and began pushing down rhythmically, like CPR compressions, but harder, more violent. "Come out! Come out! Come out!" Each word accompanied a thrust of his hands. My ribs creaked under the pressure. I felt something give, not quite breaking, but shifting wrong. Pain exploded through my chest cavity. I couldn't scream. Could barely breathe. The smoke continued pouring into my face. The hands holding me down pressed harder, nails digging through fabric into flesh. Pastor Reynolds grabbed the Bible again and slammed it down on my chest. The impact drove what little air remained from my lungs. He lifted it and brought it down again, and again, using the Word of God as a weapon, battering my already traumatized body. "By the authority vested in me by the Holy Church, I command you to depart." My vision started graying out. The faces above me became indistinct shapes. The voices seemed to come from far away, echoing down a long tunnel. My body went limp, not from surrender, but from pure exhaustion and shock. I couldn't fight anymore, didn't have the strength left. Pastor Reynolds must have interpreted my stillness as victory. He stood abruptly, raising both arms toward the ceiling. The pressure on my limbs eased as my family released their holds. "It is done," he declared. "The demon has fled." I lay motionless on the smoke-filled carpet, surrounded by puddles of water, oil, and vomit. Every part of my body screamed in agony. My shoulder throbbed. My ribs ached with each shallow breath. The taste of frankincense oil coated my mouth and throat. Smoke still drifted through the room, hazy in the lamplight. Through barely open eyes, I watched the pastor pack his implements back into his bag with satisfied, methodical movements. Calvin helped him, their voices low and congratulatory. Teresa stood nearby, arms wrapped around herself, staring down at me with an expression I couldn't read. Maureen knelt beside me, reaching out tentatively. Her fingers hovered over my arm, but didn't touch. "Mom?" she whispered. I wanted to respond, wanted to tell her what they'd done, how wrong this all was. But my voice was gone, destroyed by screaming and choking and smoke. Only a faint wheeze emerged when I tried to speak. I pulled myself up from the carpet hours later after the house had finally gone silent. My muscles protested with each movement, stiff and damaged. The living room looked like a crime scene, water stains darkening the carpet, puddles of oil creating slick patches, the acrid smell of smoke still hanging in the air. Someone had opened the windows. Cool night air drifted through, making me shiver in my ruined nightgown. The hallway stretched before me like a gauntlet. I pressed one hand against the wall for support, leaving damp fingerprints on the paint. Each step sent jolts of pain through my shoulder. My bare feet moved carefully around the debris, scattered religious pamphlets, a knocked-over lamp, drops of something dark that might have been blood or oil. In my bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Bruises ringed both my wrists in perfect finger-shaped patterns. More bruises darkened my upper arms. My throat showed red marks from where Calvin had pressed down. My hair stood in wild, matted clumps, sticky with oil and water. My eyes were bloodshot, the whites completely red from burst vessels caused by choking and screaming. I gathered clothes mechanically: jeans, a sweater, my comfortable shoes. My suitcase came down from the closet shelf, hitting the bed with a soft thump. I folded each item slowly, deliberately. No rushing, no panic, just methodical preparation. Underwear, socks, toiletries from the bathroom. My medication bottles clinked together as I placed them in a Ziploc bag. The house creaked around me. Somewhere down the hall, someone's bedroom door stood closed. Maybe they were sleeping. Maybe they were awake, listening. I didn't care which. My purse hung on its usual hook by my bedroom door. I checked inside. Wallet, phone, car keys. The phone showed 17 missed calls from my book club friends, 12 text messages. I'd deal with those later. My bank statements sat in the desk drawer where I always kept them. I photographed each page with my phone's camera, documenting account numbers and balances. Joint accounts with Calvin. I'd need proof of everything. In the bathroom, I turned on the light and really examined the damage. Using my phone, I photographed my wrists from multiple angles. The bruises showed clearly against my dark skin, deep purple marks that would darken further over the next few days. I lifted my nightgown and photographed my ribs, where I could already see discoloration forming. My throat, my arms. Clinical documentation. Each photo time-stamped and geotagged. The frankincense oil still coated my skin, making everything feel slippery and wrong. I ran water in the sink, washing my face and hands as best I could without making noise. The soap stung where my skin had been rubbed raw. I dried off carefully, then changed into the clean clothes. Each movement required concentration. Lifting my arms to pull on the sweater made my shoulders scream. My laptop went into its carrying case along with its charger. Important documents came next: birth certificate, social security card, passport, the deed to my mother's house that Calvin had always insisted we keep for safekeeping. Marriage certificate, insurance papers. I moved through the room like a ghost, touching familiar objects that now felt alien. The photo album on my bookshelf caught my eye. I flipped it open, looking at pictures from 30 years ago. My wedding day, me smiling wide in white lace, Calvin young and handsome in his rented tux. Maureen as a baby, then a toddler, then a gangly teenager. Teresa's school photos year by year, family vacations, holiday dinners, birthday parties. All those moments that had felt real at the time. I closed the album and left it on the shelf. The suitcase zipped shut with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet house. I set it by the door along with my purse and laptop bag. My car keys felt heavy in my hand, solid and real. The metal was cool against my palm. Before leaving, I walked back to the living room one final time. The evidence of what they'd done remained scattered across the floor. I pulled out my phone again and photographed it all. Wide shots showing the entire room, then close-ups, the puddles, the scattered salt, the burned sage bundles, the overturned furniture. The camera captured what words couldn't convey. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned slowly, my body tensing despite the pain. Calvin stood in the hallway, wearing his pajamas, hair disheveled. His eyes moved from me to the suitcase by my bedroom door, then back to my face. For a long moment, neither of us moved. "Where do you think you're going?" His voice was low, careful not to wake the others. I walked past him without answering, heading for my bedroom to collect my things. He followed, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. "Ebony, I asked you a question." I lifted the suitcase, feeling my shoulder protest. My other hand grabbed the laptop bag and purse. Still silent, I moved toward the front door. His hand shot out, gripping the doorframe to block my path. "You can't just leave. We did this for you. To save you." I met his eyes directly. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper, damaged from the night's trauma. "Move. The devil's still in you. Pastor Reynolds warned us you might try to run." I shifted my weight, ignoring the pain radiating through my body. "Move, Calvin. Everything we have is in both our names. You can't just—" I documented it all. Each word scraped my raw throat. The accounts, the bruises, what you did. His face changed, uncertainty flickering across his features. His hand dropped from the doorframe. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving 30 years behind me on that smoke-stained carpet. Storyblock 1010. The morning light filtered through the blinds of my studio apartment, casting stripes across the hardwood floor I'd refinished myself. 6 months had passed. I stretched in bed, noting how my shoulder no longer protested the movement, how my throat produced sound without the phantom ache of remembered screaming. I stood and walked to the small kitchen, filling the kettle with water. The view from my window showed the city awakening, delivery trucks rumbling past, a jogger with her dog, the bodega owner sweeping his sidewalk. I'd chosen this neighborhood deliberately. No churches on my block, no familiar faces, just anonymous city life that asked nothing of me except rent paid on time. The kettle whistled. I poured water over loose tea leaves, watching them unfurl in the clear glass pot. My hands, steady now, lifted the cup to my lips. The jasmine scent reminded me of nothing, tied to no memory. I'd discovered it 3 months ago at an Asian market and claimed it as mine alone. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from the domestic violence support group I'd joined, our weekly meeting reminder. I typed a quick confirmation, then scrolled through the chat thread. 12 women, all finding their way forward. Some nights we met for coffee instead of therapy. Last week, 3 of us had gone to a comedy show. I'd laughed until my sides hurt, the sound foreign and wonderful. I showered, dressed in clothes I'd bought myself, a simple blue sweater and comfortable jeans. My closet held nothing from before. I donated every reminder, every piece of fabric that carried the weight of who I'd been expected to be. The bus ride to work took 20 minutes. I'd gotten my driver's license at 57, something Calvin had always prevented. Now I drove when needed, but preferred watching the city slide past the windows, anonymous among strangers who knew nothing of exorcisms or possessed wives or families who chose belief over blood. The community center where I worked occupied a converted warehouse. I unlocked the front door, disabled the alarm, and flipped on the lights. My title was office manager, but the role encompassed everything: scheduling the after-school programs, managing the food bank inventory, coordinating volunteer shifts. The work filled my days with purpose unrelated to pleasing anyone but myself. I started the industrial coffee maker in the break room and checked the day's calendar. Teen art class at 3, ESL lessons at 4:30, food distribution at 6. My colleague Marcus, a graduate student working part-time, would arrive at noon to help with setup. The morning passed in productive solitude. I organized donation boxes, updated spreadsheets, returned emails. Around 11, the director stopped by my office. Yolanda was 62, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. "Got a minute?" She settled into the chair across from my desk without waiting for an answer. I saved my work and gave her my attention. "The board approved the grant?" She smiled, deep creases forming around her eyes. "We're funding the women's initiative you proposed." My breath caught. 3 months of work, writing and rewriting the proposal. A program to help women leaving abusive situations, job training, legal support, temporary housing assistance. Everything I'd needed and had to fight for alone. "It starts next month, and Ebony..." She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We want you to run it." I pressed my palms flat against the desk, grounding myself. "I've never managed a program this size." "You've lived what these women are living. That matters more than credentials." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight and gift of her trust. The afternoon unfolded in organized chaos. Teenagers arrived with paintbrushes and opinions, filling the art room with color and noise. The ESL students practiced conversational English, their accents blending into a symphony of effort and hope. During the food distribution, I helped carry boxes to cars, smiled at families, remembered when I'd had nothing and nowhere. By 8 o'clock, I locked up and caught the bus home. My apartment welcomed me with its sparse simplicity. I'd furnished it with secondhand finds: a sturdy table, a comfortable reading chair, plants that thrived on the windowsill. No family photos, no religious imagery. Just space that belonged entirely to me. I made dinner, stir-fried vegetables and rice, and ate standing at the counter, looking out at the city lights. My phone rang, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. My sister Helena's voice, uncertain and small. "It's me. I know it's been months. I wanted to hear your voice. To know you're okay. If you could call back." I deleted it without finishing. Not from anger anymore, but from clarity. Some doors, once closed, needed to stay that way. Instead, I called my friend Rita from the support group. We talked for an hour about nothing important: her new job, my program launch, the weather turning colder. Normal conversation between women choosing themselves first. Before bed, I stood at the mirror, really looking. The woman reflected back had silver threading through her dark hair, lines around her eyes from 57 years of living. But her gaze was direct now, unafraid. She belonged to no one but herself. I climbed into bed, pulled the soft blanket up, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and small victories. But tonight, in this quiet apartment with its bare walls and secondhand furniture, I was exactly where I needed to be. Free. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.